I, 25F, grew up in a modest three-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood with my parents and my brother Jerry. My dad worked as a high school teacher and my mom ran a small bakery from our kitchen. They weren't wealthy, but they made sure Jerry and I never felt like we lacked anything. This house has been in our family for nearly 30 years. My parents bought it when they first got married and poured their hearts into making it a home. Every corner of this house holds memories. The kitchen where Mom taught me to bake cookies, the backyard where Jerry and I built countless snow forts, the living room where we all gathered for Sunday movie nights. My parents worked incredibly hard to pay off the mortgage early, living frugally and saving every extra penny they could. Last year, they sat Jerry and me down and told us they wanted to pass the house down to us. They saw it as their legacy, something they could give their children to help us build our own futures. Jerry and I agreed that I would live in the house since he had already bought an apartment closer to his workplace in the city. We worked out a plan where I would buy his share in early 2025, giving me time to save up the money. I moved in during 2021, and it felt right being back in my childhood home, now making it my own. I met Harry at a friend's birthday party 2 years ago. He was working as an assistant manager at a retail store, and we hit it off immediately. He made me laugh with his silly jokes about difficult customers, and we ended up talking until the party ended. Our relationship progressed naturally, weekly dates turned into spending whole weekends together, and soon we were practically living together anyway. Harry had been renting a small studio apartment with a roommate, and when his lease was coming up for renewal, we started discussing moving in together. It made sense for him to move into my place since I already owned half of it and it was much nicer than anything we could afford to rent. He moved in mid-August, and honestly, the transition was smoother than I expected. We fell into an easy routine of sharing chores, cooking meals together, and making plans for our future. Last night was supposed to be a special evening. We had organized a housewarming party, inviting our close friends to celebrate this new chapter in our lives. Harry was particularly excited because his best friend Sam, who lives 3 states away, had flown in for the weekend. Sam and Harry go way back to their college days, and while I had only met him once before at another friend's wedding, Harry always spoke highly of him. The party was going well, we had good food, music, and everyone seemed to be having a great time. Around 11 p.m., I headed up to bed since I had an early morning meeting at work. Harry and Sam stayed up to catch up, which was understandable since they rarely get to see each other. Our bedroom is right above the living room, and the old house has this quirk where voices sometimes carry clearly through the air vent. I was almost asleep when I heard them talking about the house. At first, I tried to ignore it, but then I heard my name mentioned. Harry was explaining to Sam how the house ownership would work, that I would be buying it on my own because my parents specifically wanted to keep it in the family. This was something Harry and I had discussed openly several times, and he had always seemed understanding about it. But Sam's reaction completely blindsided me. His tone changed immediately, becoming aggressive and accusatory. He started lecturing Harry about how naive he was being, saying things like he was setting himself up to be taken advantage of. The more I listened, the worse it got. Sam insisted that Harry was being manipulated by me and my family, that we were using him as free labor for house improvements while ensuring he had no legal claim to the property. What really made my blood boil was when Sam suggested that my parents and I were orchestrating some kind of financial scheme to exploit Harry. The irony of this accusation is almost laughable. I work as a senior software developer at a tech company, making well over 6 figures, while Harry is still working his way up in retail management. I've never asked him to pay rent, contribute to the mortgage, or cover any house-related expenses. I even insisted on keeping our finances completely separate to avoid any potential issues down the line. Sam kept going on and on about how Harry needed to protect himself legally. He warned that Harry was setting himself up to be homeless if we ever broke up, painting this dramatic picture of Harry being thrown out on the street with nothing to show for his time here. What hurt the most was Harry's response, or rather, his lack of response. He didn't defend our relationship or challenge Sam's accusations. Instead, he just sat there making vague noises of agreement or mumbling noncommittal responses. Before Harry moved in, we had extensive discussions about the house situation. I remember sitting down with him at least 3 times to go over everything. I explained how the ownership would work, that my parents wanted to keep the house in the family, and that I would be responsible for all property-related expenses. I even suggested we put our living arrangement in writing to protect both of us, but Harry brushed it off, saying he trusted me completely and didn't want to make things feel too formal. We've been together for 2 years, and until now, I thought we had a solid relationship built on trust and open communication. We handled disagreements maturely, supported each other's goals, and generally felt like we were on the same team. Harry never expressed any concerns about the house situation before. In fact, He often talked about how grateful he was to live in such a nice place without the burden of rent or mortgage payments. I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, replaying every conversation we've ever had about the house. Had I missed some signs of resentment? Was Harry just pretending to be okay with everything to keep the peace? I started second-guessing every decision I'd made. Maybe I should have insisted on putting our arrangement in writing, even when Harry said it wasn't necessary. This morning, I called Jerry to get his perspective. He reminded me that I've been more than fair with Harry, pointing out how I've never asked him to contribute financially to the house despite him living here rent-free. Jerry thinks I should confront Harry directly about what I heard, but I'm worried about how that conversation might go. What if bringing it up makes Harry defensive or creates tension in our relationship? I also can't stop thinking about Sam's motivation in all this. He's only met me once, briefly, at a wedding last year. What made him so convinced that I'm some kind of manipulative person trying to take advantage of his friend? Has Harry been telling him things that made him form this opinion of me? The thought that Harry might have been complaining about me or our living situation to his friends makes me feel sick. The whole situation feels like walking through a minefield. If I bring up the conversation, I have to admit I overheard them talking. If I don't bring it up, these doubts and worries might eat away at our relationship anyway. I've always prided myself on being direct and honest in my relationships, but now I'm not sure what the right move is. Am I doing something wrong here? Should I have structured our living arrangement differently? I've always believed that keeping certain assets separate, especially early in a relationship, was the smart thing to do, but now I'm questioning whether that approach made me appear cold or untrusting. I need some outside perspective on this situation because I honestly don't know what to do next. Update 1: The past week has been a blur of sleepless nights and anxiety. After 3 days of barely eating and jumping every time Harry spoke to me, I knew I had to address what I overheard. I waited until we had finished dinner, something I had barely touched, and brought up the conversation. I tried to be casual about it, mentioning that the old house had weird acoustics and that voices sometimes carried through the vents. Harry seemed unconcerned at first, but when I specifically mentioned his conversation with Sam about the house, his expression changed for a split second before he caught himself. His response seemed perfect, almost too perfect. He explained that Sam had always been the anxious friend in their group, always seeing the worst in every situation. Harry claimed he had shut down the conversation later, telling Sam to drop it because he trusted me and our relationship. He even quoted himself saying Sam was being paranoid and that he could always move back with his parents if things went south. To prove his commitment to making things fair, Harry suggested a new financial arrangement. He offered to take over all the household bills, including groceries and utilities. He said this way, we would both be contributing equally to our life together, even if the house remained solely in my name. It seemed reasonable, and for a moment, I felt relieved. But over the next few days, small things started nagging at me. Harry began spending more time on his phone, always angling the screen away from me. He started taking calls outside or in another room, something he had never done before. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague and dismissive. I tried to include him more in house-related decisions, hoping to show him that I valued his input. When the dishwasher needed repairs, I asked his opinion about different models. When I was planning to repaint the living room, I suggested we pick colors together. But his responses were half-hearted, almost disinterested, yet he insisted on keeping all the receipts for these improvements in a separate folder. Then came the moment that shattered everything. Harry had been struggling with his work email on his new phone, complaining that it kept crashing. Since I work in tech, he asked me to help set it up correctly. As I was configuring his email settings, a notification popped up from someone named Marcus Kelly. The preview showed enough for me to see it was about property law and ownership claims. My hands shook as I opened the full message thread. I know I shouldn't have, but something in my gut told me I needed to see this. There were dozens of exchanges between Harry and this Marcus person, who turned out to be a real estate broker specializing in property disputes. The broker had sent detailed information about common law property rights and ways to establish partial ownership claims through documented contributions to property maintenance and improvement. The messages went back months, predating Sam's visit. Harry had been methodically building a case, documenting every minor repair he did, every improvement he suggested, and every dollar he spent on the house. The broker had advised him to establish patterns of financial contribution and to get his name on as many house-related documents as possible. I felt like I was going to throw up. While I had been agonizing over making Harry feel included and valued, he had been orchestrating an elaborate plan to claim part of my family home. I remembered all the times he had insisted on keeping receipts, how he had pushed to have his name added to utility bills, and how he had been subtly suggesting we should formalize our living arrangements. In a daze, I called Jerry. My brother has always been my voice of reason, and I needed him desperately. As I explained everything, Jerry started connecting dots I hadn't even seen. He reminded me how Harry had recently offered to pay for a new water heater, insisting on handling the contractor himself. How he had been pushing to renovate the kitchen, saying he would manage the whole project. Even his suggestion to take over the bills now seemed suspicious. It was all about establishing a paper trail of his contributions to the property. The most devastating realization was about Sam's visit. That conversation I overheard wasn't just two friends talking, it was a calculated performance. They must have known about the vents carrying sound. They wanted me to hear Sam defending Harry, to feel guilty about the house situation. They were trying to manipulate me into offering Harry partial ownership out of guilt and fear of seeming unfair. Everything I thought I knew about my relationship feels like a lie. The man I trusted enough to invite into my family home, the person I thought I might build a future with, had been plotting behind my back all along. Even worse, he had involved his friends in this scheme, making me look like the villain in his story while he systematically worked to take advantage of my trust. Update 2: After discovering Harry's messages with the broker, I spent 2 days gathering evidence and preparing myself for the confrontation. Jerry helped me document everything in the house, taking photos of all rooms and valuable items, just in case. He also stayed over the night I planned to confront Harry, saying he didn't want me to handle this alone. I waited until after dinner, when Harry was settling in to watch TV. I sat down across from him and placed his phone on the coffee table between us. His face changed the moment he saw it, and I knew he realized what had happened. Before he could speak, I told him I had seen the messages with Marcus Kelly. Instead of denying anything, Harry immediately went on the offensive. He stood up, towering over me, and started ranting about how I was the one being unfair. He said it was manipulative of me to go through his phone, completely ignoring that he had asked me to help with his email. Then he launched into this clearly rehearsed speech about his rights as a cohabiting partner. The things he said next made my blood boil. He claimed that by letting him move in and contribute to the house, I had essentially entered into an implied contract with him. He talked about how he had improved the property value with his work around the house, work I had never asked him to do. He even had the nerve to say that my parents were discriminating against him by wanting to keep the house in the family. Jerry, who had been quietly listening from the kitchen, walked in at this point. Harry immediately changed his tone, trying to paint himself as the reasonable one. He started talking about how he just wanted things to be fair, how he was thinking about our future together. But when Jerry asked him why he had been secretly consulting with a real estate broker instead of talking to me directly, Harry snapped. He revealed that he and Sam had actually met with a lawyer before the housewarming party. They had planned the whole conversation, making sure I would overhear it. The lawyer had advised Harry to establish a pattern of contribution to the house and then use that as leverage. Harry had been documenting everything, taking photos of repairs he did, saving receipts for cleaning supplies, even keeping a log of hours he spent on yard work. The most shocking part was when he pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. Inside were copies of every bill he had paid, photos of every improvement he had made, and even recordings of conversations where we discussed house repairs. He had been building this case for months while pretending everything was fine between us. When I asked him how he could do this to me after everything my family had done for him, letting him live here rent-free, including him in family dinners, treating him like one of us, he just laughed. He said I was naive to think anyone would pass up a chance at property ownership in this market. Then he threatened to make things messy legally if I didn't agree to give him partial ownership. Jerry, thank God for him, had already contacted his friend who practices real estate law. The next morning, we met with the lawyer who helped us draft a formal eviction notice. She explained that since Harry had never signed a lease or paid rent, and since there was clear documentation that this was my family property, his claims were shaky at best. The lawyer also discovered something disturbing. Harry had been taking detailed photos of all my personal documents related to the house. He had copies of the property tax statements, utility bills, and even photographed my parents' deed while I was at work. His phone was full of photos documenting every corner of the house, every repair, every improvement, all dated and categorized. We learned that Harry had been building what he thought was a common law property claim. He believed that by contributing to the house maintenance and living there, he could force a legal claim for partial ownership. His broker had been advising him on how to strengthen this claim, suggesting he take on more household expenses and document everything. The most painful part was realizing that our entire relationship for the past few months had been a lie. Every time he offered to fix something around the house, every time he insisted on keeping receipts, every home improvement project he suggested, it was all part of his plan to stake a claim on my family home. Update 3: The eviction process turned out to be more complicated than we expected. After serving Harry with a formal notice, he initially refused to leave, claiming he had established tenant rights despite never paying rent. He quoted laws about common law partnerships and property rights, clearly regurgitating what his broker had told him. Jerry stayed with me during this time, sleeping on the couch because we were worried about what Harry might do. Our concerns weren't unfounded. One morning, I woke up to find water seeping under my bedroom door. Harry had plugged the upstairs bathroom sink and left the water running overnight, claiming later that he had just forgotten to turn it off. If Jerry hadn't been there to discover it quickly, the water damage could have been extensive. Things got worse when Harry started removing items from the house. He took the new microwave we had bought together, claiming it was his since he paid for it. He tried to take the living room furniture that had been in my family for years, insisting that since he had helped clean and maintain it, he had some claim to it. He even attempted to take my mother's old china cabinet, saying he had repaired its hinges once. The final straw came when he contacted my parents directly. He showed up at their house unannounced, trying to convince them that I was being unreasonable and vindictive. He told them about all the improvements he had made to the house, conveniently leaving out that he had done these things as part of his scheme to claim ownership. My dad, who had always been polite to Harry, told him firmly to leave and never contact our family again. Harry then tried a different approach. He started telling mutual friends that I had led him on, making him believe we had a future together while planning to keep the house for myself. Some friends actually sided with him, saying I should have been more willing to share the property since we were in a serious relationship. These were the same friends who had been at our housewarming party, who had probably known about his plan all along. The situation finally resolved when our lawyer sent a formal cease and desist letter, threatening legal action if Harry continued his harassment. We had documented evidence of his attempted water damage, photos of him removing items that weren't his, and witness statements about his harassing behavior. Faced with potential legal consequences, Harry finally agreed to move out. Jerry helped me change every lock in the house and install a security system with cameras. We had to check every room to make sure Harry hadn't hidden anything that could cause damage later. We found several strategically placed containers collecting water from loosened pipes under sinks, which could have caused serious mold problems if left undiscovered. Today, the house is finally mine again, free from Harry's presence and manipulation. Looking back, I realize I ignored so many red flags. His excessive interest in house repairs, his insistence on keeping records of everything, his strategic comments about building a future together, it was all part of his plan to lay claim to my family home. The whole experience has changed how I view relationships and trust. My parents worked their entire lives to provide this home for their children, and Harry tried to take advantage of that legacy. At least now I can focus on making this house truly my own again, without worrying about someone trying to steal what my family worked so hard to build.